doing well. We are a little bit sweltering here in Virginia, and I'm going to take my non-air conditioning Volvo out a little bit later with my wife. I normally don't worry about that myself because I like the fresh air. I'll put up with the heat just to get fresh air. Although AC is definitely nice, and right now the sun's kind of beating down upon everything. But I was wondering if you heard about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act 2021. Like any pork barrel bill that goes through Congress, this one has a whole lot of consequences attached to it that the title doesn't necessarily betray. And in this particular instance, some pretty draconian situations are going on with with this bill being enacted in full when it finally comes to fruition. So starting in 2024, automakers will be given specific details about safety measures that will have to be incorporated in the car, which will include a breath analyzation device integrated probably in the filtration system of the car that will allow the car to determine whether or not you've had too much alcohol. The other thing that will probably be utilized is fingertip sensors, things that you have to put your fingers on, such as gear shift lever, or other things you might touch in the car. They'll have sensors built into them that will again determine if you are impaired through some drug or alcohol. And then further safety measures will require the car to be disabled. For instance, you get in the car, the sensors determine that you've got a little bit too much alcohol in your breath. It will disable the car. So what's the problem with that? Don't we want to keep people more safe on the highways? Don't we want to prevent drunk drivers from driving? Well, a lot of things to think about. Number one is there's going to be a lot of data that's collected by these car companies that have these things in place. They're going to be sifting through that data. They'll be utilizing that data. They'll be selling that data. You will not be all alone in your car anymore, ever, if you purchase a new car after these devices go into effect. Everything will be monitored. And of course, there are some monitoring capabilities right now. For example, if you own a Tesla, tons of data about you and your driving habits is being stored, filtered through Tesla's software that helps them determine like driving habits, average speed, things like that, crashes, etc. And so these new devices are going to have even further intrusion into our lives, those of us that don't have electric cars. And I'm talking about new cars going forward. The other thing to think about too is as time goes on, more and more automakers are building into their products what's called planned obsolescence. So these systems that are required to run your car break down more easily. Why is that? Well, one, because they're more complex. And because they're more complex and they take up more parts, individual parts, and they're harder to get to because I don't know if you've looked at old cars' engine bays versus new cars' engine bays, big difference there. Because of all of that, when something breaks down, it costs that much more to fix, and because there's more of them, it's more likely that somebody's not going to keep up with them. Therefore, you're going to have cars more readily disabled because if they start to have, let's say an old car, for instance, on average broke down 5% of its components every year of the life of its ownership. Well, 5% of an older car might be just a couple parts, and it wouldn't be too bad, for things that normally wear out. But now you get these new cars that have thousands potentially of components and electrical systems and computer systems, and those 5%, let's say, breakdown of those per year, the bills are going to be astronomical, not just for the parts themselves, which are going to become more pricey, but because of the complexity, but also the labor intensity is going to boost the price, and therefore it's going to become untenable for people to fix these cars and keep them on the road. So you are planned for the obsolescence of these vehicles. So not only is this going to be an intrusion of your privacy, but it's going to cause greater and greater hardships for people that, like myself, like to keep cars on the road. Now, I will grant you, the last few months have been kind of on the more expensive side for me in keeping my cars on the road. Invariably, I've got something going on with one of my vehicles that makes it a challenge. But I'll tell you, that's far cheaper for me to maintain all these cars that I've paid off with these ongoing nagging problems than having car payments or much higher insurance premiums because they're new cars, or property tax, which we have to pay in Virginia for our cars. All of these things make it so that I'm actually in a much more affordable situation because I maintain these old cars. Well, now we have another reason to maintain older cars: lack of intrusion into your privacy. And think about this too. We don't know the full details of how they're going to intrude on your capability of driving if, let's say, a sensor determines you've had too much to drink. Will it just simply disable the car? Will it also alert the authorities? Will it call a loved one, like your primary contact person, say, come pick up Joe, he's had too much to drink? Whatever those things might be, we don't know the full extent of them yet. And like government regulations tend to go, these things will increase over time. We'll get regulation upon regulation. Just look at the history of the automobile, for instance, in auto regulation and travel. We've had increasing regulations since the advent of the vehicle. And if we have government centralized priority, where you've got a strong centralized government, those regulations will only increase. And of course, ultimately it will benefit the people who make the policy, the cronies that they operate with. So, how will those intrusions into our driving capability impact us? Think about this too. Suppose these sensors are designed to prevent you from excessively speeding, and it monitors like your local weather conditions, it monitors traffic patterns, it knows the speed of the road you're driving on. And you're now driving with your wife to the hospital. She's about to give birth in your car. Or you're driving with a parent and they're having a heart attack and you're trying to rush them to the hospital. And the car limits you suddenly to maintain a proper speed, and you are about to have a heart attack yourself because you're just trying to get your loved one to the hospital. Now, I wouldn't advocate driving like a maniac in that situation, but in most cases, you'd probably be faster than just waiting on an ambulance to get there in time to take care of your loved one. So how about that? How about you're driving along and it's raining heavily, and for whatever reason, the engineers didn't pick up on a leak into the computer boxes that are underneath your hood, and you get a shorting of the circuitry that determines blood alcohol level. And the computer reads that as your alcohol level is too high or you're driving impaired or whatever, and just shuts off your car or mandates that you drive to the side of the road and puts you in limp mode until you get on the side of the road and then parks you and you can't go anywhere. And you were just on your way to work and it was raining and the sensor went out. That stuff's going to happen, folks. The more you put complexity into a machine, especially when you have, let's face it, a strained workforce that doesn't have the same capabilities they used to. And really, frankly, an ever smaller amount of engineers that know how these things work because of the high level of complexities that go into these systems, these things are going to happen. Tesla is renowned for having issues with electrical and reliability issues that are well documented, and you can find them easily online. And so imagine that compounded, multiple folds. And then also running these systems is going to require greater support of precious metals for like the batteries, for the wiring, etc., to make these, for sensors to make these things work. And so with that, you're going to see an increase in the cost of all precious metals, which cars are reliant upon to get those into the cars, our cell phones, etc. It's going to ramp up the cost of everything, and it's going to make it more difficult for an average, working person to be able to afford all that. So anyway, I know I brought up a lot of things related to that, but check out that act. The big thing we need to pray for, because this will start going into effect over the next 10 years from 2021, is that we need an administration in for the next presidency that's going to work with Congress to put a kibosh to this. And you need to be on your representatives and your senators that this is a bad thing. Why? For the average constituent, not for the ultra rich, not for these companies, because they're going to make bukus of money from this, but for the average person that they represent. This is a really bad idea. Anyway, appreciate your time. I'm about to head out for a weekend. You take care of yourself, and God bless.